If you're concerned about losing your wallet, well, you better put a lot of cash in it. I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle Now. And Bill, today results...
Well, I guess that's the end of my wallet.
That's right.
Any other questions before we close this thing up?
This is results from an interesting study reported on by the Washington Post. And this experiment was carried out by researchers in some 355 cities in 40 countries using 17,000 wallets. And the wallets contained varying amounts of cash, but generally they had some identifiable cards in them, as well as a key, and then some cash, no cash, or a significant amount of cash. And what they found out as a result of this study, Bill, was that regardless of the country, people were more likely to try to return wallets they found with larger amounts of money inside. This is published in Science magazine, and this butts up against, according to Washington Post, longstanding economic models that predict that people are more likely to be dishonest when the potential payout is larger. Let me just ask you, first of all, does that result surprise you? And if so, why or why not?
It doesn't surprise me. And to be honest with you, until you told me the conclusion, I thought the study was going to say that people lose their wallets less frequently when there's large amounts of money in it. I thought that's what they were going to say. Nobody loses their wallet on purpose. The subconscious mind is constantly tracking any number of things, hears every single thing, is aware of every single sound, filters out 95% of the inputs. And I imagine that if you had, a significant part of your life savings in that wallet, your subconscious mind would be a lot more aware of, leaving the house without it, which I still maintain is true. But no, this doesn't surprise me. And you know what's nice about this, Scott? This is an example. Yeah, I'm glad I caught myself before I finished it. People being willing to return a wallet that has a large amount of money in it rather than one that has none or very little is not virtue signaling. It's virtue.
And how do you make that distinction?
There's a difference. Virtue signaling is doing things that cost you nothing to make other people think that you're morally above reproach. Free Tibet. I've got a Free Tibet sticker on my car. Yeah? What does that actually accomplish? Nothing. Put a USMC sticker on your car if you want a Free Tibet. So virtue signaling is an act that is put on by people to show everybody else how virtuous they are, and it doesn't cost you anything. Sweet. Actual virtue is aware of a number of factors, and all of these factors find themselves in this equation that you mentioned. A person who finds a wallet will either keep it if they're dishonest, but most people are not dishonest. They really aren't. Most people are, at least in this society and most Western societies, most people are sympathetic to the idea that somebody else now is suffering an enormous amount of anxiety and hardship through carelessness and through no fault of their own. And the more money that's in that wallet, the more that person is suffering. And so for people who are fundamentally honest, if you find, let's say you find a completely empty wallet. When I say empty, I mean no credit cards, nothing, just an address written down on a piece of paper, right? Here, if anybody finds this wallet, this is where you can send it to. Okay, there's some incentive to do that, but frankly, most people would probably not go to the trouble because it's a piece of leather on the ground, you know? If the wallet was very, very nice leather and it was engraved, it would raise the value of the wallet to the owner and make people more inclined to want to return it. And when you get to the place where you now have large sums of money in there, it pushes people over the action membrane, right? There's a lot of things that we want to do and a lot of good deeds that we think about doing, and just frankly, a lot of other things that we should be doing and don't do. And so the question is, what actually motivates you from thinking a good thought to spending the time and effort, and it is, to actually doing the good deed?
So if you find a nickel on the ground, you'll probably slip it in your pocket. If you find a $20 bill outside Wal-Mart, you may take it into the customer service people and say, hey, I think somebody dropped this out there.
That's as perfectly as I could put it. As perfectly as I could put it.
Let me tell you what, there's a psychologist at Boston University, Nina Mazar, who has studied honesty in laboratory conditions, but this gets outside the lab as they do this experiment in the public, sending these research assistants out to drop wallets in various places or to rush into a bank or somewhere else and say, hey, I found this on the ground outside. Could you take care of it, please? This psychologist, Dr. Mazar, says people overwhelmingly see themselves as good people and seek to maintain that image, even if it overrides the impulse to get ahead. Now, when you were talking about virtue signaling, it occurs to me in the context of this quote or this paraphrase of her idea that people actually need to virtue signal to themselves. They need a signal that says to themselves, yes, I'm the good person that I think I am.
We're splitting hairs a little bit here, but my definition of virtue signaling is broadcasting to others a virtue that you're not willing to actually do the hard work for. When you talk about the reward that you get from doing the honest thing, that sense of satisfaction that you get, you're not signaling virtue to yourself. You are responding to the fact that through whatever reason, you are in fact a virtuous person. And in many cases, virtue is its own reward. In most cases, virtue is its own reward. Life has become so complicated and so inverted in so many ways. For generations and generations, the saying was, no good deed goes unrewarded. And now it's been inverted because it's funny and it's got a ring of truth to it. Now no good deed goes unpunished. And that's a way of saying that virtue is no longer, it's not only not longer taught, I'm talking in generalities, but it's no longer valued, it's no longer discussed, it's no longer expected. That's the word I'm looking for. You're not expected to return that wallet. And a lot of people out there think you're a chump if you do. So the question then becomes, there's no signaling involved in this decision. Let's say I find a wallet with $1,000 in it, and there is a driver's license, so I can return it if I want to. Let's say there's $10,000 in it. Okay, now, what are my choices? I found this wallet, nobody sees me. What are my choices?
Well, it belongs to a terrorist or a drug dealer if it has $10,000 in cash.
So let's say it has $9,000 and
under federal regulations.
And a receipt for $1,000 at Best Buy. Yes. Okay, so let's say it has $9,000 in it. I find a wallet in a parking lot. There's no one around. I pick it up. I go in my car and I sit down. No one saw me. And I've got $9,000 that I didn't have before. Now you come down to, what kind of a person are you? And I'm not assuming that you don't need the $9,000. I'm assuming that you are in desperate need of the $9,000. Would you rather have the money and gain the benefits of that money, or would the fact that you did something that you knew to be wrong be so oppressive to your conscience that it's not worth $9,000? And that's the fundamental difference between an honest person and a dishonest person. I don't mean to trumpet my own virtue here, but it's a good example. It's an example that I connected to because I actually happened. I was just stone cold broke through basically most of my life, and I was in my early 30s in Miami, and I was on very, very little money, and I took whatever money I had. It was probably $150, and I said, I better buy some food now because it's going to have to last. So I went down to the supermarket. I bought a lot of this rice and beans and all of this masses of stuff that'll last for a while, and I took most of the money I had and I spent it on that food. And I came back home and I'm unpacking the food and putting it up onto the shelf, and I look into my wallet and there's my money. And I realized that what had happened was I'd gotten into a discussion with the cashier as she was ringing up the bill, and she never asked me for the money. I never offered it. We both had assumed that I'd paid for it. We had assumed that I'd paid for it. And I walked out of there with as clean a conscience as possible because I wasn't aware of anything that I had done wrong. So I got back into my car. I went back to the supermarket. The supermarket is closed and there's nobody in sight. Now that gives me a perfectly good excuse to myself You can say, well, dude, you tried, you tried. There's, what can you do? If there's nobody there, you can just throw the money, leave it on the street. But it's not what I did. I kept banging on the door until somebody came out, and then the manager opened the door, and I explained what happened. And he said, oh my God, thank you. We really were having a serious conversation with one of these employees. We were beginning to think that maybe they'd lifted the money.
Because the drawer was short.
No. Yes. Yeah. Yes. They were out $150 worth of groceries, and that money wasn't in there. I said, no, this is what happened. We just got into a conversation, and we had assumed that the transaction had taken place like it has every other time in my life. And I got home and I unpacked the groceries and I found the money was in my wallet. So I'm here to pay it.
So let me finish.
So needless to say, they took it. But the point I'm trying to make here is this. I could have, without any consequences, have kept that money because it wasn't my mistake, number one. Number two, I could have written myself a perfectly good hall pass for saying, well, you went after it and you tried to return it. You're an honest guy, but there was nobody there. But Scott, I needed that money and I needed the food badly. But it's intolerable for me to have knowingly taken something that I didn't pay for. Abraham Lincoln walked, how many miles was it to return? Was he overcharged some guy by $3 or something like that?
A library book, and I think he also.
Okay, because it is his core character. And speaking of Lincoln and the honesty of Lincoln, I'm not trying to make a case for Lincoln so much as I'm trying to make the case for the mindset. When Lincoln was in office and suffering the most strain of any human being I've ever been aware of in history, Lincoln said this. He said, I would like to conduct my administration in such a way that when it is over, I have at least one friend in the world, and that friend is me.
Let me just finish up with one question. We're going to have to keep this answer short. Time is of the essence. Because we've seen results of studies like this that indicate that most of the time, most people are trying to do the right thing,
yes,
even when the stakes are high for a stranger. So the argument can't be made that it was something we're doing for the sustenance of our social circle or our family or our local Rotary Club. This is for a complete stranger. Right. And in fact, in this case, a fictitious stranger. But that most people are trying to do the right thing most of the time. Bill, what does that say about what the tenor of our political debate should be like in this country when we realize that most people, even those we oppose, are people of goodwill?
The politics of the United States is a couple of orders of magnitude below what the people of this country deserve. Now, you can say, of course, that people get the governments they deserve and we elect the people that we deserve. But when you bring up something like this, it makes you realize that all of these passionate debates and hatreds we have for our fellow Americans are predicated on political things that are amplified by people like me and by other people as well, because these are important issues. They're not inconsequential issues. But I've never I never failed to be struck by going to a football game or something, or watching a game with friends of mine who were theater majors in college, and we're watching the Gators, and we disagree on everything politically as vehemently as is possible. But basically, I like them and they're friends and we're watching football and we're all on the same team. It's those Georgia Bulldog bastards and those Florida State knuckleheads that are the enemy that must be fought tooth and nail. And so what happens, Scott, is that this society, this culture of ours, is like a Rubik's Cube. And all we see is the red side and the blue side. And all we see is this liberal conservative divide. But if you take that same group of people, that same population of America, and you twist this cube in the other way, now you got Packers fans and Bear fans. You twist it some more, and you got Yankees fans and Red Sox fans. You twist it another way, and so on. People who would be natural enemies, just frothing at the mouth with hatred for a Yankees fan talking about a Red Sox fan, may find themselves both rooting hard for the Bears, against the Packers, whatever the case may be. And so, yes, so many of these divisions are not only, they're real divisions, and they need to be argued. And one of the reasons that we argue as hard as we do is because there is so much bias built into one position that it has to be fought. But nevertheless, we are the same people. And when I hear people usually on the left, but not exclusively. When I hear people say, my, somebody is dead to me because of their politics, that makes me sad. I've had that situation personally, but it wasn't because of their politics. It wasn't their politics. I was perfectly happy to put up with their politics. It was the fact that their politics wouldn't leave me alone. And that's what became intolerable.
Well, trying to make the United States of America more like a tailgate of Gator Nation. This is Bill Whittle Now, that comes to you 5 days a week thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com. If you'd like to become one of them, go to BillWhittle.com and click that Become a Member link. For Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making this possible.